All right, so some of you have been typing questions while we were doing the webinar, so I'll just go through some of it now. In terms of brochures, the updated brochures are not out yet. They should be out in a couple of weeks, but just keep checking back for that. The application process, as it was last year, you do have to submit for each specific position. However, I will hand that off to Bridget to just go another run through of the application process for you.
So mentioned the application materials need to be received by December 20th. You would use that link that takes you to the MCPHS portal. That portal will then take you to a system called Fluid Review, and you will basically upload all your materials to this Fluid Review system, and then you'd be able to select all of the positions that you will be able to apply to through that particular portal. So basically, it's much easier, I'd say, than in the past. And so it's basically one portal, but all of your materials will be in this one particular section. So that's how you would apply to each particular program after that. And then just one of the side questions regarding letters of recommendation. When we submit the contact information, will we be sending the person a link? And that's a yes. So through the system, it will be like a generated email will go to your particular letter writer, and they will be prompted to submit on your behalf.
And again, if you this particular process, just send an email, better safe than sorry. And another question was that how many applicants do we accept? So essentially, if you just look at how many positions are open, that would be how many fellows will be accepted. And about loan repayments or fellowship salaries. So we offer a competitive salary with the other fellowship programs as well. And we're all surviving, so pretty much is working out.
And there are deferment because we are affiliated with a university. It is a postdoctorate program, and so there is the opportunity for you to defer student loans through the university through the 2 years.
All right. What are something that you wish that you knew beforehand to prepare for mid-year? So what are things that you wish beforehand to prepare for mid-year? I guess I'll open that up to other fellows.
So mid-year is really overwhelming, especially when you have a lot of interviews back to back, and it's difficult to find some time to just rest and breathe. So I think one important thing is maybe like bring some notes with you if you want to refer back to them between interviews, and also make sure that you bring snacks. You really don't want to go into your last few interviews of the day lightheaded or dehydrated. So keep lots of snacks and water on you. That's the main thing I wish I knew.
And I just, one other thing to add is just to be yourself. You're interviewing the programs as much as we are interviewing you. And you really do want to make sure that you fit with the program that you're applying to. So definitely make sure to be yourself throughout the process. We do want you to be the person that you are and would be as a fellow.
Okay, this is Wilhelmina. I want to chime in also. I agree with what the other fellows have said. And one thing that helped me to prepare is that I spoke to alumni who were fellows, and there were a number of events held at my school that I attended. So through those media, I was able to get adequate information and prepare properly for mid-year. So I'm saying that to say if there are any programs being offered in your school, say a workshop or something of the sort where you get a chance to speak to fellows, I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of that because you get a wealth of information to help you adequately prepare.
Okay. So there's a question on increasing your chances if you didn't plan on attending mid-year. So that's a bit difficult. A lot of the interviewing does take place at mid-year. That's not to say that it is 100% you have to attend, but just because of the competitive nature of fellowship programs in general, it's strongly advised that you do attend mid-year. Advice on that, I guess you could always try and contact the companies ahead and just let them know that you won't be able to attend, but that you are very interested in the fellowship program.
I would advise if you don't plan on attending mid-year, to still go through the PPS process so that you are processed just like any other applicant. And so you would inform the company that you would not be attending mid-year, and they would kind of arrange around that. So they would definitely make sure. So I'd say definitely sign up for and register for PPS in order to make sure that you're considered as a candidate. Otherwise, your emails may get lost in the shuffle.
Well, Amina here, I would also say that unless there's a really, 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 really good reason why you can't attend mid-year, you should. Because unlike residencies where mid-year is for just getting to know which hospitals are going to be recruiting for the following year, at mid-year, yes, it's optional, but they are interviewing students who will potentially be brought on. And some will, you get invitations for on-site very early in the process. So unless there's a really good reason why you can't attend, I think everybody would agree with me that make every effort to attend mid-year. It's not required, but it's far better that you do that than you don't, because you get a chance to meet not only the current fellows, but the potential employers. And as she said, get to meet them and see whether it's a good fit for you as well. So I would strongly encourage attending if you can.
Yes, I second what everyone said. So how many applicants may apply before the position stops receiving them?
So that would just echo everyone's sentiments. I'd say the earlier the better. So PPS opens October 23rd. So I definitely make sure that you're getting your materials ready now, so that you're ready to apply. I'd say closer to Thanksgiving time, most of these interview slots are kind of filled. So yes, you can walk on if they don't have an opening at the time, but I would just definitely make sure that you get your materials in. The sooner the better. And that's just to echo all the other questions regarding your application materials. So once you interview, the sooner the better. So yes, December 20th is your hard deadline of getting things in, but I'd say the sooner these materials are in, the better. And I think most companies require you to have at least one letter of recommendation before you're offered an on-site. So I would just keep informing your letter writers that all of these materials, say give them the deadline of December 20th as well, so that they know that your letter is ready. So again, earlier you plan, the more chances you'll have for getting all your materials in.
Yeah. I know one trick that some people do, and this is not just for fellowship, but it could be like for college applications as well, is sometimes they tell their references a couple of days in advance. So it's December 20th, but they may tell them that it's due like the 15th, just to leave that lag time. So that's something you may want to try as well. Another question is, why did you choose MCPHS instead of Rutgers? I'm personally going to say that's a personal decision. All the companies are really good, but you have to find what works for you. And just kind of like reiterating what Bridget said, you're also interviewing the company. So as much as it sounds weird, you will feel that connection when you interview with certain people in different companies. So I can't really say that one is better over the other. It's a personal thing.
I think you also had to take into consideration like the different therapeutic areas you're interested in, like the kind of environment you're interested in working in. For example, Boston is kind of known for having a lot of like small innovative biopharmaceutical companies. A lot of the programs in the Rutgers Fellowship are some of the larger companies you think of, like Merck or the other, like AstraZeneca, the other branch of Novartis, not the one that we have here. So you had to take into consideration like what would be best for your functionality, what therapeutic area you'd be interested in. Like a lot of the programs up here are rare genetic disorders and oncology. So if you're interested in that, then that's also something to consider. So in addition to like how well you fit with the interviewer, also considering what your professional goals are.
There's a question about GPA in terms of what's required. How heavily does GPA matter for prospective fellows? Is there a certain GPA that's considered a red flag? So what I will say with that is that the general idea is that GPA for residency may weigh more than for fellowship. That being said, you shouldn't be failing. We want you to be passing your PharmD program. So again, with looking at the application for fellows, it's the well-rounded applicant. So don't think you're going to be discounted because you have a lower GPA, or you're automatically going to get it because you have a higher GPA. So it's all your application materials. So your CV, your letters of rec, your personal statement. So it's not just one thing that makes the decision.
And I think there was a question about someone who graduated and they're coming back to the fellowship. So they've had a position outside, whether it's in retail or hospital pharmacy, or you're doing a residency. There are many applicants. So I'd say you're just as competitive as those who are graduating in this upcoming 2018 school year. So I'd say a good number. Definitely not as many applicants as the 2018 grads, but I'd say a pretty good number.
I think there's also a question about, are there fellow positions outside of New England area, say in Michigan? So the fellowship brochures will tell you where the locations are. There are a few companies that have locations outside the Boston, New England area. But if you're looking for positions in Michigan, then there may be another program over there that offers that. But I can't say there are many within the MCP network that offer positions outside the New England area. I mean, BD has offices in New Jersey, and any other companies that are outside? Because Pfizer,
yeah, Pfizer's in CT, Connecticut. So.
Yeah, there's another program in the headquarters in New York, but that one is affiliated with Rutgers, and they're completely different programs. So quite apart from that, this is heavily based in the New England area.
So I was informed that there are some questions being posted on the YouTube Live. Due to some technical difficulties, we can't see those questions. So we'll give you like a minute or two if you can just re-ask your questions via the webinar jam. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Abby, while waiting for that, there's also a question about what health agencies can an MCPHS fellow expected to be rotated at. So again, this is a fellowship. So I know there's a program for regulatory affairs where, as a part of the module, you may go to FDA for a few months or weeks. But the programs here are not structured that way. For the most part, you're spending about 80% of your time at the parent company, and then 20% of your time with MCPHS as the adjunct faculty. But beyond that, we're not heavily into rotations at federal agencies.
That being said, there are some opportunities. I know a Biogen fellow was able to explore another agency, I think working at the National Health Service in Maryland. So again, it's kind of going off what Wilhelmina said. It may not necessarily be structured that way, but that's a decision that you can make with your industry preceptor. So there's definitely a fluid dialogue with your industry preceptor. So the question on how many rounds will an applicant typically go through at mid-year for MCPHS fellowships? Gotta open that.
I think that depends on the company. So, for example, some companies I interviewed with had 2 rounds at mid-year itself, and then the on-site interview. Other companies had just 1 round at mid-year, and then the reception and the on-site interview. So it varies, but you'll have like your first round of interviews, and then you might have a second round before the reception. Otherwise, it'll go straight to reception and then an on-site offer if you're given one, on-site interview if you're offered one.
And just to kind of add on to that, some companies will request to speak to you via the phone ahead of time, and I would consider that an interview. So phone screens or phone interviews. So please, when a fellow reaches out to you regarding that, treat that just like an interview that you'd be having at mid-year.
So for the question, how much of your work projects are self-initiated versus assigned to you by your company preceptor? Fellows?
Again, this is it's something that really varies on the teaching and working style that your individual preceptor has. So for example, at my company, Agios, it's very supportive, and they very much walk me through what the expectations are and what the projects are that I'll be working on. But I don't know if there's someone who has another experience at another company where you had to have a little bit more self-motivation in cultivating projects for yourself.
I'll speak to that. Just as a second year, your first year is definitely a little bit more, I'd say your preceptor is giving you more project-based work. But as a second year, I am basically the regulatory lead for a program, in addition to supporting two other development programs. So my preceptor is there if I have questions, but I'm running all of our meetings. I'm driving the briefing book development. So I think it definitely shows that the 2 years you're building on that knowledge. So first year is definitely more of a foundational, and you will definitely get a lot of exposure within that particular fellowship program. And as you move on to your second year or a year and a half, you're definitely going to have a lot more independence, and you'll be initiating a lot of your projects. I guess Kathleen, you have a 1-year fellowship program. Would you be able to speak to your experience?
Absolutely. So I feel like, just as everyone else has said, that it really depends on the program you're at. And this is actually a really good question to ask at your interviews. What types of opportunities will I have to do particular research, or how much are you planning on, what projects are you planning on? What does a fellow typically do at that company? I know with my particular program, it's only a year. And so it's sort of like a sprint. I'm trying to cram in as much as possible. And my program definitely has a lot of projects planned for me, but there was room I requested to do something in the spring. And that request, they're working on it right now to be able to provide me with an educational opportunity that I feel like would help me in my oncology development and clinical development. So just make sure that you ask. I mean, just as it's been said, you are interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you. So if there's something that is really important to you, ask and see where you can get that.
So then I'm going to move on to the question, is it necessary to have experience in industry when applying for a fellowship? Is it still possible to get an industry fellowship position without any industry experience? So I can kind of speak to that. I attended MCPHS, and even though I was in the Boston area, I did not get a industry rotation until after mid-year, and I didn't have any internships before that, and I was still able to get the fellowship. So one of the things is they're not only looking for industry experience, but also the skills that you have. And again, the applicant as a whole, based on your skills and your personality, will you be able to handle the projects that they assign to you? And even if you focused a lot in hospital or retail, you did projects, make sure you speak to that, because there are a lot of things that can kind of move over to industry in terms of your work ethic. So it's not impossible to get a fellowship without industry experience. And there's a lot of applicants who don't have a lot of pharma companies in their state. So we're aware of that when looking at the fellow applicants. But I don't know if any other fellows have something to add with that.
Abibala, I would say with an MSL role, my company was probably even more interested in my clinical rotations as they were to my industry rotations, because they going straight into an MSL role, you're kind of skipping that part, and so they want people who have lots of hospital rotations.
So for all the fellows, is the position that you have now what you are interested in as a career, or are you looking to move to a different position?
I guess as a second year, so a lot of the fellows that are on the webinar are just starting their fellowship, and so they have a lot of experiences to undergo, and it's very exciting. But I have roughly like 6 to 8 months left of the fellowship program, and I'd say yes. I think the opportunities that I've been given have definitely kind of put me in a position to become someone within the regulatory space, and I'm looking into being a regulatory strategist. And so hopefully I stay in that position. But yes, I think I've had enough experience that I think I could definitely obtain a job within that particular field. And I do like regulatory affairs after my year and a half.
Is it looked down upon to apply to more than one functional area?
I think that they definitely prefer if you have a clear idea in mind what you're going to go into. And obviously, like, you'll see some of the medical affairs positions, for example, it's not like every company has the same kind of functionality offered. So maybe there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of that. But if you're applying to say like PV and regulatory and medical affairs, then that might look a little bit like you're kind of all over the board. And are you really the best candidate for a certain functionality? So I think that in general, they prefer if you stick to one functionality or one or two, that you can really speak to why you'd be the best candidate for those.
And the other thing too is with Rutgers, every company you interview with will be able to see what positions you're applying for, because there's a form that you need to fill out to indicate your interest. And when you sit down to interview with them, it's the first thing they're going to ask for, that sheet which shows which companies and which positions you're applying for. So over there, it's far more easy for them to be able to tell which different positions you've applied for than with MCPHS, because here you're interviewing with the companies differently. So I think unless it comes up in the conversation, I do agree, it doesn't, it's not exactly frowned upon, but then again, if you're applying for 5 different positions, are you really the best candidate for this particular position? But it's not as much, if you're generally interested in say 2 or 3 positions, that's fine. It's not as much of a risk, or it won't come up in a conversation as easily or quickly as it would in with a Rutgers interview. So.
I would add on to that, now is the time to do your research and really figure out where you feel like you belong, because besides just having other people see that maybe you don't have a solid passion about one field or another, mid-year is like the Hunger Games of interviews for fellows. And so if you're applying to like 5 different areas, it might get really stressful keeping all of those things straight. So just my personal recommendation would be do as much homework as you can beforehand so that it's easier for you at mid-year.
All right. So on average, how many interviews do fellows engage in during mid-year? How many on-site second round interview offers do fellows receive on average?
So the second part of that question is definitely variable, how many interviews on site you receive. They obviously do kind of a culling after every round of interviews. So fewer and fewer candidates get, passed on to the second round, and then the reception, and then the on-site. But with regards to how many interviews you do during mid-year, definitely don't try to apply to 30 positions or anything like that, because A, you'll find it really difficult to even schedule that many interviews, and B, it'll be difficult to really explain why you're dedicated to each one of those programs. And, it'll be hard to keep all of those interviews in line and all of those companies in line. So what I heard going into mid-year is like the kind of sweet spot you should aim for with how many positions to apply to is around 10. Obviously, you can do a little bit more, you can do it a little bit less based on what your interests are. But once you start stretching into a lot of interviews, then you're kind of going to be stretching yourself thin, and it'll be pretty hard to keep track of all of those programs and to even schedule the interviews you need to schedule if you get second and third round interviews for all of those positions.
All right, so since we're almost done, I'm gonna kind of speed up with the questions. Once we upload items to PPS for programs to see materials, can those materials be edited up until mid-year, and will programs see the newer versions? Essentially, are the materials we upload to PPS supposed to be final versions? I would say if you're uploading it onto PPS, it should be something that you're willing to have the company see, because you could upload it one evening and they're checking it, and based on that, you get an interview or you don't get an interview. So yeah, that's what I would say. But
so I actually have something to add to that. So yeah, definitely, as Abimbola said, you should upload the most final thing that you have at the time to PPS. Right during mid-year, I was doing a rotation at the FDA, and I had a really big project that finished just like as mid-year was starting. So what I did was like I uploaded the most recent thing I could in a timely fashion to PPS, but I also then took an even more updated version of my resume to mid-year. And I handed that to interviewers, and I pointed out like what more I had done in addition to what was on PPS already. So if there's additional things that come up between when you upload to PPS and schedule your interviews and show up at mid-year, then you're welcome to just speak to that during the interviews.
And then some programs will have you upload to the fluid review system. So that you would have to, if you're updating that, you just have to let your coordinator or whoever's coordinating your application, they'll reach out to you and they'll back you out, and then you can update. So that you just have to it's a little bit more work, but if you do, that's kind of the process.
so which materials are submitted when we make a PPS account? When you update your profile with a CV, do you also add a letter of intent? So on PPS, a company will tell you what they want you to upload onto PPS. At a minimum, it's going to be your CV. That being said, I do know a lot of programs do want some type of personal statement or letter of intent with the CV. So just make sure that you're looking at what the companies require when you are on PPS. So is it okay if we have more than 3 letters of recommendations?
I would say most often, once you get 3, that's really the top, like the max. You are more than willing to submit more, but 3 is really what's requested. So I'd say do the best you can just to submit 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. If it's asking for 3, please don't go more than 3. There are several students who are being considered, lots of recommendation letters. A 4th one won't do anything. If you think you've got 5 people who can write really fantastic recommendations for you, choose your best 3 and have them send the recommendations. Any more than that, and I think it really doesn't do anything extra. Stick with the 3, please.
Yes. So yeah, what Wilhelmina and Bridget said, I agree with. So there's someone who said they're P2 at the University of Michigan. Are there any tips recommend for you in order to straighten your application in the future if you like to pursue industry? So I guess one thing is just make sure you talk to as many fellows as you can. And if you can get experience with an internship, a lot of companies offer like 3 months internships. I know Takeda, they have an internship program that's about 3 months, and they get a lot of interns, and it's both in Deerfield and on the Boston campus. So see if you can do that. For me, I decided I wanted to talk to some of the fellows, so I went in for half a day and I talked to different people in the department. So if you can't get experience, the next best thing is just talk to as many as you can. If you reach out to us on like LinkedIn or via email, everyone in the program is really nice and we'll get back to you. And we're always open for phone calls as well.
And I would add to that leadership opportunities are really important. Being able to show that you have leadership or that you've participated in student organizations, I think are great ways to strengthen your application.
And also do some research as well. If you have an opportunity to do research with a faculty member at your school, especially if you're able to get a publication out of it, even better. Because again, everybody coming to mid-year is highly qualified. So how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself from your competition? So, again, she said leadership and not just participate in student organizations. I mean, everybody is a member of something, but what did you do in there? Because again, not only will that help you stand out, but the interview process is all situational interviews. Tell me about a time when. So you have to have a scenario and have the experience. So having that leadership position through student organization will give you that experience to be able to answer those questions as well.
Okay, well, I think we're about out of time. I think that's all the questions that we can take for tonight. But I think like Ambola said at the beginning of the presentation, if you have any more specific questions, feel free to use those emails that were provided for you on the slide to reach out directly to the programs that you're interested in and kind of lodge your questions there. All right, so with that, we will end the presentation. Thanks again for joining us tonight and have a good night, everyone.